Hi, everyone. I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and thank you so much for tuning into one of our talks today. We are a year-round talk series bringing you the best creative voices across film, television, and theater. And today we're here to talk about the wonderful new film, Princess of the Row, with the wonderful Tayler Buck and Edi Gathegi. And I wanted to dive in and ask you both a little bit about what drew you to the project and whether it kind of for this particular project went beyond just the characters themselves, because there's also so many themes of social justice and social activism that are really delicately woven throughout the script in such a beautiful way.
You want to take this, T?
Right. So initially I had gotten the audition for the project because I had previously worked with the casting director. And so I went in and I read the script and I just immediately fell in love with it. I started thinking about Alicia and how I related to her. You know, she's so strong and determined and independent, and I really related to her on those aspects. And so I was excited to dive deeper into her character, and you know, especially because she's got her whole storyline about how she wants to be with her dad and her living in foster care and all those different aspects to her backstory. And so I was really excited to dive in and just figure out how to best portray her character. And I was excited to work on this movie.
How about for you, Edi?
The kind of artist that I am is the one that runs to the danger. I like to tackle things that scare me. So this bow on the page was exactly the type of character that I was looking for. And it's funny because in the earlier drafts, I went through and I went, you know what I really want to try is to communicate something and affect the audience by saying less. So let's get rid of his lines. Like let's just get rid of his lines and just see if the character can stand on his own with just backstory and emotion and his connection and relationship with his daughter. So I had been looking for something specifically in the homeless space for a long time. And it was just like serendipitous that this is the project that came at the right time. And as you mentioned, it tackles a lot of different subjects, you know, foster care issues, which is a huge problem in Los Angeles, California. They need so much more support, homelessness, locally, nationally, globally. I mean, these are systemic issues that have maybe been around forever, but being a part of a film that aims to humanize these characters is a form of activism, and it's a form of awareness, which is what everybody, I think, needs, that awareness and that compassion.
And it sounds like Max Carlson, who is the writer and director of the film, really handled this subject matter with a lot of sensitivity. And I heard that he was working with a gentleman called Gerald Hall, who actually lives on Skid Row himself and kind of worked as a liaison to the production, both in the development process and when you were filming. And just wanted to ask you a little bit about that experience of working with Gerald and, you know, being able to ask him questions and having him introduce you to people. And also just the way that that really ensured that, you know, filming on that location itself also meant that people were very welcoming to the production and felt like, you know, you weren't there to take advantage of them and their stories.
I mean, that's a fantastic question. I feel like you gave a lot of answers in that question too. Gerald was a godsend for us, just to be able to have somebody who had real world and real time experience with this world that we're entering. You know, like you said, he made sure that the relationship between the crew and the cast and the residents of Skid Row worked, and that we would be safe. And then he also had a lot of background and experience that like my character specifically had. Gerald was a veteran. So it was being able to talk to, you know, the real manifestation. I mean, this is not a biopic. It's not based on any one person, but maybe an amalgamation of characters. And Gerald is one of those characters. So he was invaluable for me personally. I hung out with him a lot before we started filming, walking the streets, got to ask a ton of questions. He pulled people aside and allowed me to interview them repeatedly. So Gerald, he's the unsung hero. He is so pivotal and important to our production.
Yeah. And Tayler, I wanted to ask you a little bit about some of the research that you maybe did in terms of the foster care system, because that's such a big theme for your character in what that experience is really like. And in terms of thinking about what the emotional effect would be and how that would inform not just her relationship with her father, but the different homes that we see her placed in throughout the film.
Right. I was really lucky that I had Sean and Max to help me with that and to help me really dive into her background and, how she feels about the foster care system and how she feels with her dad and, homelessness and living on Skid Row. So I did watch a few documentaries about, Skid Row and the foster care system. And I went over to Max's house quite a bit before we started filming. And he worked with me on the script and, he worked with me on how he wanted Alicia to think and how he wanted Alicia to talk and act and, what type of person she was and how she will fight for her father through anything, through all the obstacles that she has to face in the foster care system, being driven away from her dad because she has to go with, new families. And so I was really lucky that I was able to work with them and, they helped me out a lot during the process of filming. So, yeah.
Yeah. And then Eddie, you were touching on the fact that Bo is a veteran, but part of his story is also that he sustained a brain injury while serving in Iraq. And so I was really interested in the details and the nuances that you bring into your performance about, some of the mental health struggles that he's suffering, that he has no control over, and kind of where you gleaned what those details were and how you wanted to work that into your performance alongside just the general PTSD that he's experiencing as a veteran.
Well, it was very complex, comprehensive dive. One of the exciting things for me about acting is the detective work, is doing all the research and figuring out, where your character comes from, what makes him tick, and the things that the pathos, what your character is dealing with. And he is suffering from PTSD, which is totally natural when you're in a war, but then also the traumatic brain injury. So I just read a ton of books and I watched a bunch of documentaries. And I just tried to understand brain disorders and brain diseases a little bit more. Amnesia, also, memory loss in older age. All of those things played a part in figuring out specifically. And then we had medics that would talk about the specific injury that we decided that Bo was dealing with. And then you try to put it all together, and then you try to let it all go. And that's what I tried to do. And Tayler's such a magnificent actor that moment to moment, it was just as if we were the real characters existing in real time, playing off of each other. I tried my best to distance myself from the recognition of my own daughter, even though that's the only thing that's really keeping him alive, is the connection to the only family member that he has.
Right. And even one of the things that you do within that is there's so many moments where your gaze and your eye contact is always looking just past her or just past the object that you're looking to kind of show that slight disconnect. And I was interested in kind of how you landed on that specific choice and the way that you really use that as a tool throughout the film.
It was funny because, part of the hair, makeup, and wardrobe testing, you're trying to build that character. And I decided to give him cataracts. And what that allowed me to do was to also just have sort of a hazy view of her, to not actually be able to see her that well, because you're juggling so many balls when you're trying to play a character who's damaged in so many different ways. So I think it was just what I landed on in terms of the best way to bring the research and the reality together and still be in the scene and still be in the movie. I mean, maybe that's a hard question to answer because it's just what naturally happens once you feel like you've got the character wrapped around your own skin.
Yeah. And then Tayler, one of the things I wanted to ask you about in terms of Alicia is we get such an eye into her inner world through the fact that she's also a creative writer, and we kind of see some of that escapism on screen. And I wanted to ask you how that was a really valuable thing in terms of your performance, to have something in the script already there that you didn't even have to construct, that just gave you such an eye into her inner world and the way that she was thinking about a lot of the things that she was dealing with.
Right, 100%. I mean, that was so great for me because I didn't have to, dive that deep into that part of her character. So, that was good for me. And I think it was great. I think it's a really important part of the story. She's only 12 years old. So she has this fantasy world that she creates to kind of cope with everything that's going on in her real life. I think it's such an important aspect because, she goes through a lot of stuff. I think it really brings people back to understand her age, you know, I think we forget at times throughout the movie, she's 12 years old. She's going through all of this by herself. She's being so independent and doing all of this on her own for her father. So, I mean, I think it's a really important part of the story. I'm really glad that that was put in there.
Yeah. And it sounds like once you were filming together, there were a lot of kind of very just like intrinsic unspoken moments in how you crafted that relationship. But I was interested about, you know, the beginning stages when you first met each other, some of the conversations that you had and how you really thought about forming this father-daughter relationship, because you have to bring such a level of intimacy and connection and history to screen together.
Right. I think honestly, we didn't talk that much before we went to set. I mean, we really just kind of dove into it. And with, you know, Beau, he has his PTSD and his traumatic brain injury, and he can't be there for Alicia in the way that he should be, in the way that she needs him to be. And so us not really, you know, creating that relationship beforehand, I think it was really vital to the story. I think it really helped with our characters because she doesn't really have a connection with her father besides, you know, past what she can remember. So I think that was really important. It really helped me as an actress, you know, trying to figure out how to play Alicia.
And I must say that was one of the hardest parts of filming for me, was not being able to connect with Tayler. Say, oh my God, you're so amazing. Everything you're doing is so fantastic, and staying in our respective roles, because I think that was what best served our mission.
Yeah. Was that the same in terms of how the two of you also just mapped out the physicality and the body language between them? You know, there's so many small details that you throw in, like the fact that Alicia's always the first one to kind of like physically run towards him and hug him and lean in a little bit more. Or was that again just something that you just found the rhythm of that very naturally together?
Yeah, I think we found it just very naturally. We didn't really plan out that type of thing. We just kind of dove into it and went with whatever was going to happen.
I think it's also the givens on the page. You know, this is a girl who desperately wants a relationship with her father. That's the family that she recognizes, and he's incapable of at times even recognizing who she is. So a lot of it is on the page, and when you understand the given circumstances as Tayler understood, then it just comes out. You know, she wants that connection. She has to initiate, and then she in a lot of ways becomes the parent. She has to guide, she has to lead, she has to see for him, she has to think for him, and she did all those things.
Yeah. Right. How did that lead into your construction of Alicia Tayler? Because you're constructing her as a 12-year-old, but you really think so carefully about the details and the way that she has been forced to grow up and shoulder this responsibility, you know, and like Eddie said, become the parent. So there's this incredible maturity that you bring to her alongside still feeling like she is a 12-year-old girl at heart as well.
Right. I mean, I was only 13 when I filmed it, and I feel like I related to her a lot. I mean, I have always been mature for my age. I mean, I was ahead in school, really smart. I mean, I graduated at 16, like, so I really related to her in that sort of aspect. And so it wasn't hard for me to kind of figure out how she would think and how she would act. You know, I just kind of thought to myself, well, what would I do? You know, and then put myself into her situation and okay, so if my father was da-da-da-da-da, and so if I had to do, you know, if I was in the foster care system. And so that's kind of how I made those decisions on, you know, how to play Alicia. And then Max and Sean really let me, you know, have my own way with it. So I'm really grateful for that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's key. What she just said is, I mean, what would I do? You know, that's how you get into a character. It's that makes so much sense that you have the vehicle with which to ask yourself, what would I do? And it'd be right for the character. This character is also, I think is worth mentioning, incredibly brave, like unprecedented for her to want to live on the street rather than a home for the love of her father. That's incredibly brave because it's so dangerous out there. You know, I think Skid Row has the highest concentration of violent crimes in the country. In terms of population density. It's so dangerous and so scary. And this 12-year-old girl doesn't see any of those things. All she sees is family and duty. And I think it's a duty that Bo instilled in her through his military training. And when he was able to be a father, I think he raised her to be that way, which I think is another interesting dynamic about this story.
Yeah. Were there aspects of military training that you felt were useful to understand? Because we see it creep out a couple of times. You know, there's a moment where Bo is woken up and he doesn't know where he is and he thinks he's in a combat zone for a minute. And the way that he responds is very much kind of that internal instinct that he's obviously developed from the situation that he's been in before as a veteran.
It wasn't as important for me to go to boot camp for this particular project. I've been in many boot camps and I've played military characters in other projects. So I just used what I had already learned and developed and put it in this film as needed. But that's not the driving force, his military background or story. I mean, it's there. And I think I put in this movie as much as I needed to put in.
Yeah. And one of the things that you have to do with your performance as Bo is you have to kind of flip the dynamic and flip the tone of a scene very quickly. You know, one moment he kind of knows where he is and he's connected, and then literally it's a split second later. Is there any sort of challenge to that, and suddenly having to find yourself in a very different space and take yourself internally to another very different space in such a short amount of time? Or did you find that it really just felt ingrained with the way that the character was written and the scenes, the way that Max crafted them out?
I think also during the development, we started to finesse when these moments would happen. And then, like I said, once you got a deeper understanding of who this person is, and you can, I talk about wearing skins a lot because that's what you do. You know, the character has its skin, and then you, as the artist, slide into that. And then once you're there, the world opens up. You can kind of do whatever you want. You can improvise. Yeah. So it's just being moment to moment and allowing real things or the circumstances to shift you, and then 100% committing to that new direction.
One of the scenes that I wanted to ask you both a little bit about was the montage sequence where we see the two of them. It kind of feels hopeful. It feels like things are going in the right direction for them both as characters for a second, you know, and they're trying on different outfits in stores for Bo, because it's so interesting. Like usually we see that type of scene in a rom-com or, you know, a situation like, oh, this girl has found who she is. She tried on a bunch of different clothes, but it's used as kind of a tool where we have that connectivity, but in such an interesting and dramatic way with the two of them. And it really is kind of like the one moment of the film that has that sense of like levity and just joy to it. And so I just wanted to ask you about the experience of getting to film a scene like that in a movie like this.
Right. I mean, I think it was great. I mean, you know, it's after everything happens, and there's such a dark kind of experience before that. And so I think, you know, after Alicia has gone through everything that she's gone through, I think she deserves, you know, this one moment of happiness. She deserves to have this happiness for a bit, you know, before the story ends. And so I think it was very vital to the story. I mean, I liked it. I loved filming it. I loved having that part there with us in the clothing store and taking the pictures, and you really see Alicia happy at that point, and you see how she has gotten everything that she's wanted with her father now. This is what she's wanted to happen this whole time, and she's finally gotten to that point.
I've never made that compare. It's an interesting comparison that montage would be compared to a rom-com. And I never looked at it that way. It is, but it's a somber version of that. It's a bittersweet version of that, as Taylor said, because of the moment before. And I think from Bo's perspective, I think there's something deep inside him that will always remember his choir. He used to, you know, backstory, whatever. He used to be a part of a choir. So if a song comes on, he deep inside him, he might recognize it. Deep inside him, he will always recognize Alicia. But sometimes at the front of his brain, he can't compute. So I think in that somber moment, based on what has happened before, it is a very beautiful, bittersweet, somber experience to be trying on these clothes with this guy. He goes along with it. He isn't running away and acting out and having an episode. He is allowing this costume fitting dress up play to take place, because I think deep inside him, he is connected.
Mm-hmm. And because you just mentioned that moment of, you know, if he hears a song that deep inside he recognizes it, and there is a scene within the film where we see that happen. And I loved the choice that you made, that it wasn't something where he starts kind of fully singing along to the song. You always kind of go for the subtle choices in your performance, and it's more that he's just very quietly to himself, just speaking along to it. And just wanted to ask you a little bit about the choice that you made in that particular scene, and the way that throughout the film, going for the more subtle, understated moments also really just informed the choice in that moment.
I'm trying to remember the exact, it's very
Mm-hmm.
The disease of, I'm trying to remember the name. I can't believe it. Say, maybe I got the disease. It's a horrible disease. You get it when you're older, about the memory. What is that specific memory?
Alzheimer's or dementia?
Alzheimer's, and then there's dementia.
Yeah.
So in some of my dementia work, I would study these people who had dementia or Alzheimer's, and they would be hit with something from their past and then immediately recognize it. Mm-hmm. So this was one of those moments where that happened, that he was hit with a moment of his past that was muscle memoried. It was something that he knew front to back. Mm-hmm. You know, anytime that would come on, he would go full out, but he's a different person now. Mm-hmm. So when that song comes on, he's not going to be muscle memoried in the same way as if his mind was completely there. So I guess that's the answer to why I decided to make it subtle, because mm-hmm. he does have that recognition. These flashbacks and the muscle memory is coming forth, mm-hmm. but he can't attack it in the same way because he's different.
Mm-hmm. And then Tayler, you know, one of the aspects with Alicia is beyond the relationship with her dad, you also kind of fully construct in the relationship that she has with her mom. There's kind of a brief moment of mention in the script that her mom was an alcoholic and left the family because she couldn't cope with it. And so I wanted to ask you about how that really also informed a lot of the choices that you made in terms of thinking about the emotional experiences that this character has gone through.
Right. I thought about it a little bit. I didn't go too deep into that backstory because, you know, she was so young, and we see in her flashback to where she's 6 years old, and it's only Beau with her. So the fact that she even, you know, remembers that to that extent is, I mean, it's great, but I don't think that she really knew to what extent, you know, her mom leaving and, you know, being an alcoholic. And she's so focused on her dad. I don't think that affected her to such a great extent as her father has affected her. So, you know, I put a little bit of thought into that in her backstory, but I didn't put as much as I did with her and Beau.
Yeah. And how valuable was it in terms of being able to film those flashback sequences for both of you?
I think that those moments really showed the kind of father that he was, and that he was capable of being before everything fell apart. But you have to remember the flashbacks also happened after the injury. So he has begun his descent into chaos. And I wanted to film actually a ton of flashbacks. I wanted to have the wife. I wanted to show what happened to her, what her backstory was. But we found in the edit that it wasn't necessary. We found that the story could be told equally as effective, if not more effective, without having too many flashbacks. But I thought the flashbacks were key in terms of just showing the audience who he was before he was on the street, you know.
Yeah. And in terms of just the depth and the emotional layering in these characters, did you find that these were characters that when you wrapped production, that there were aspects of them that just kind of continued to sit with you, that you were still thinking about even after you finished filming?
Well, for me, I was already pretty much, you know, like Alicia. You know, we were both very determined and independent. I think what I really took from this film was a different way of looking at, you know, homelessness, because we as a society, I think we, you know, look down on homeless people and we talk down to them, and or we walk straight past and we don't even, you know, give a second look. And after filming, you know, because I do live in Los Angeles, but I never really experienced the homelessness to the extent that, you know, I never really realized what a great extent it was at until we filmed on Skid Row, you know, until we filmed in downtown Los Angeles. I got to see it and experience it all firsthand. And so after finishing filming the movie, I really thought to myself, and I think it gained a bit more compassion, you know, and I hope that's what other people also take away from our movie, you know, compassion. They're people too. You never know the story behind someone. You know, you walk past them and you don't even think about them. You just walk straight past, but everyone has a story, and we never know everyone's story unless you talk to them, unless you treat them like people, say hi, you know, help them out. So definitely learned a bit more about that.
Yeah, that's for me, yes, that as well. You know, you walk away from a project like this having experienced everything that you experienced, and having delved into it to the extent that you delved into it, and you want to spread the word. You want to spread the message, which is what we're trying to do in the film. We're trying to get the film to crack open people's hearts who would otherwise walk past a homeless person or someone who's struggling and not think twice. We're trying to get them to actually think twice, because once they think twice, then they view the person as a human being, and they can try to figure out how they could be of service to that struggling or hurting person. This film, to me, I just wanted to represent love and understanding. In terms of what I walked away with, having played Bo, I tried really hard to leave him with the film, because this is one of the very few times in my career that I've had to go this far into who the person is and stay there. It was virtually impossible for me to play this character and break character in between takes, or break character for lunch. Once I put hair and makeup, wardrobe on at the beginning of the morning, that was Bo until I went home, and even Bo sometimes when I was home. So, and we only filmed for 19 days, which is a super quick shoot by all standards. So it wasn't that long of a time period, but what I found, it was most effective for me to try to stay in character the whole time. So I was very happy to let that go when we were done.
Yeah. Well, both of your performances in the film were so striking. Even just within the first few minutes, you knew, like, I just knew that watching these two performances and the relationship that you constructed together was going to be something really special for the entire journey of the film. And thank you so much for talking with us this afternoon.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so much, Mara.